Hi there. I was thinking of something that happened to me earlier on in my life. I decided one day I was going to try and make some money. And I'm sure that thought's gone through many of your heads where you're like, you know what, let's make money. Because we all want money at some stage in our lives. And we always want that to buy some nice things, big things, small things, whatever it may be. And I remember one day I decided I was going to make money, and I heard about a rugby competition or a rugby tournament that was happening in Durban. And what it was, there were a whole lot of primary schools coming to Durban to play rugby. And it was all these primary schools, not only from different parts in South Africa, but also from overseas clubs and overseas schools. And so what I decided to do was like, aha, I'm going to make money. So I went out and I bought some shirts, okay, for these kids, so they could take home a memento of the whole tournament. And on those shirts I printed all the badges of the different countries that were represented at that tournament. But here was the problem. The problem was that I had to find money up front to pay for those shirts and to pay for the printing on those shirts before I'd got any money in from selling them. And so I went out and I took a little bit of money that I had, only the tiny bit I had left in my life, and I went out and bought these shirts and got them printed. And I want to tell you something, I was sweating big time, because I knew that if I didn't sell a certain number of shirts, I was going to run at a loss. I was going to be like throwing money away. And I remember I had to sell a certain amount. I can't remember the amount now, it was so long ago. Let's say 80 shirts. So by the time I'd sold 80 shirts, sure, I would have made enough money to pay off the company where I bought the shirts from and to pay the printers for printing on those shirts. And anything I made over that would now become profit. But sure, after day one, I sold 2 shirts. And I was like, oh, this is the worst day of my life. Everything that can go wrong is now going wrong. Okay? But the good news is that soon I reached that 80 target. Word got out, hey, there's shirts being sold here with all our country flags. Bring money tomorrow. And guys brought money and they bought shirts, and eventually I sold like 200 of these shirts. I sold all of them. But the important thing for me was hitting that 80 mark. Because once I'd sold 80 shirts, I now knew I was starting to make money. I'd paid off the expenses. Okay, and we're going to look at a similar sort of scenario in a question we're going to do now, and we are going to graph our results. In other words, we're going to draw graphs on a set of axes. So let's have a look at this, what we're doing today. Sometimes we can have more than one graph on a set of axes. In this lesson, we'll be looking at an example of where we'll be drawing 2 graphs on one set of axes. We'll also be discussing the term break-even point. Okay? I've already mentioned what break-even is, but I haven't put the scenario with the word break-even, but you'll get to pick it up soon. Okay, so David's shop buys solar lamps for 45 Rand each. He marks up the prices and sells them for 100 Rand. His monthly expenses, in other words, his fixed costs, are 12,000 Rand. Whoa! Guys, that means before he even sells one lamp, he's got expenses of 12,000 Rand. Now, what sort of expenses are those? Those could be the expenses of the rental of the shop, paying his staff. So he's got to make 12,000 Rand just to pay the rent, to pay his staff, to pay the lights and water, to pay security. 12,000 Rand. Until he makes 12,000 Rand, he's not making a profit. Then he's got to go and buy these lamps for 45 Rand, and he sells them in his shop for 100 Rand. Got the idea? Let's have a look at the question. Which expenses change? These are variable costs. So we know his fixed costs are 12,000 Rand. What are the variable costs? Well, the variable costs are going to be the cost of the lamps. Because if he buys one lamp, he's got to pay 45 Rand. If he buys two lamps, he's got to pay 90 Rand. If he buys four lamps, he's got to pay 180 Rand. So that is changing all the time. So the variable costs are costs that are not constant. They're changing, and they're changing based on the number of lamps that he's buying. But guys, the fixed cost is this 12,000. So whether he buys one lamp and sells one, or buys 1,000 lamps and sells 1,000 lamps, he's still got to pay 12,000 Rand for his rent, his lights and water, paying his staff, paying the security. Okay? He's still got to find that 12. That is a fixed amount. But the variable expenses are the number of lamps that he actually buys. Okay. So we've said which expenses change, and the expenses that change are the lamps, and we call these variable. Which expenses stay the same? We've discussed it, the 12,000, and these are called fixed costs. Okay. Now, in both blank rows, fill in both blank rows in the table below. Okay, now we get to some interesting stuff here. So, number of lamps. Oops. This guy decides he is not buying or selling any lamps. So he waits for the month, he's going to take orders. Someone comes in the shop, how many lamps would you like to buy? And the person says, no, I don't want to buy any. It's like, oh, wow. Next customer, how many lamps do you want to buy? Oh, I don't want to buy any. Oh, no. So he's not buying any lamps because he doesn't have to sell any. Okay, he works on that kind of thing. You want lamps, you tell me, I'll go get them for you and I'll give them to you, right? So his expenses for the lamps is absolutely nothing. But guys, there is still an expense based on his fixed expenses. Because whether he buys and sells 1,000 lamps or no lamps, he's still got to pay for the rent, for his workers, for the lights and water, for security, whatever the case is. And that expense is 12,000 Rand. Okay? So whether he buys it or buys any lamps or not, 12,000 Rand. So if this month he buys no lamps and sells no lamps, he's got an expense of 12,000. What's his income? Well, every lamp he's selling it for 100 Rand. But if he's sold nothing, he's bringing in nothing. Now, what do you notice? His expense here is higher than his income. And guys, when your expense is higher than your income, what do you have? You have a loss. Your company is in trouble. Now, let's have a look. He buys and he sells 100 lamps. Now remember, if we go up again, we can see that every lamp he pays 45 Rand for. So his expenses are 45 Rand per lamp, and remember he's selling it for 100. Now, his expense. We are going to say, hey buddy, your expense is the following. You have an expense of 12,000 Rand. Plus, you are paying a further 45 Rand times the number of lamps. Okay, so let's do this mathematically. So we're going to bring out our calculator and we are going to say, right, so this guy has got 12,000 Rand expenses. But to that, we've got to add something. 45 Rand for the lamps, and he buys 100 lamps. That means his expense is 16,500 Rand. That is his expense that month. How much is he going to make from it? Well, we know he's selling every lamp for 100 Rand, and every lamp, and he's selling 100 of them. That's 10,000 Rand. So he makes 10,000 Rand, or brings in 10,000 Rand. But guys, things are not going well yet, hey? So if in a month he sells 16 lamps, his expense, sells 100 lamps, his expenses are 16,500 Rand. and his income is only 10,000. This O is running at a loss. What happens now? He now sells 200 in 1 month. So how do we work out the expenses? Again, from our formula, we've got 12,000 Rand is what he's got to have, plus he's selling 200 lamps and he's paying 45 Rand for them, and it lands up with 21,000 Rand. So he's got to find 21,000 Rand that month. But the good news is he's got some income coming in. And what's his income? His income is this. He's selling 200 lamps and each one for 100 Rand. And it's now 20,000. Okay. He's still running at a loss, isn't he? His expense is higher than his income. And when your expense is higher than your income, you got a loss. He's spent 21,000. He's bringing in 20,000. He's running at a loss of 1,000. Now, folk, we want to get to that place, at least to that place where his expense and his income is the same. Because when his expense and his income is the same, he's not running at a loss. He's not making a profit either, but he's not running at a loss. And that is absolutely crucial. That when you have a business, you don't run at a loss. So when my expense and when my income get to the point where they are the same, I call that point my break-even point. My expense is equal to my income. Break-even point. How cool is that? Okay? So now let's see what happens when he sells 300 lamps. So we now go off and we say, okay, so 12,000 is our cost expense, plus he's buying 300 at 45 Rand, and he's got to find 25,500. 25,500 Rand is his expense. What is his income? Goodness, this guy's got to start making a profit sometime. So his income is he sells 300, each one for 100 Rand. He's making 30,000 Rand. Guys, this is exciting stuff now, because now he's starting to make a profit. But obviously, the more he buys and sells now, the more profit he's going to make. So quickly, let's have a look at this. We're going to go, and we're going to just do this quickly. 400 lamps. Each one he buys for 45, plus that 12,000 Rand he had to pay up front. 30,000 Rand is his expense here. Okay, next one, 500. Okay. We're going to say he has got 12,000 Rand expense, plus he's buying 500 at 45 Rand. Chances are 34,500. 34,500 are his expenses. Income here will be 40,000. Income here will be 50,000. Why? Because 500 times 100 is going to give me 50,000. Okay. Exciting stuff. Now, what are our next questions going to be? And our next question is probably going to be to draw the income and expense on a graph. On the same grid. So we're going to have two graphs, same grid. Draw a graph of the total expenses and a graph of his income. Okay, now folk, when I look at my set of axes, and I've got a set of axes here, I can see that I've been given no breakdown of what these axes represent. So I have to do it. Now I'm going to show you how to do this. Now normally in an exam, they will give you all the points on the set of axes. Okay, they don't have to, but normally they do. If they don't, you have to try and sort it out. Okay, so this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to say this is amount in rands. Okay, and why do I say in rands? So it saves me having to put a R in front of every digit I have. And here I'm going to say the number of, and what's he selling? Lamps, eh? The number of lamps. Okay, so I want to show you this quickly. When I look at the number of lamps, I'm going to count how many blocks I have here. These blocks are small, so I'm going to use my glasses here. All right, so when I look at the blocks, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 blocks. Now, how many lamps did I have? When we go back and we look at our table, because they want us to put all this information from the table down, we can see we're looking at 500 lamps. Now, I have 25 blocks. So if I take this and I say, right, I've got 500 divided by 25, each little block is going to represent 100 lamps. Okay, so let's go to our next little graph, and I'm going to say, right, so every little block represents 20. I'm not going to write 20, I'm just going to write 100. So every 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is 100 lamps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 200 lamps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 300 lamps. You get the idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 400 lamps, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 500 lamps. Now, I'm going to count the blocks up, and when I count them up, let's see what I get here. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 as well. And when we look at our money, we can see that with our money, we had to go to 50,000. So on my calculator, I'm going to say, right, I've got 50,000 Rand, and I'm going to divide that by 25 blocks. Each block represents 2,000 Rand. Okay, and again, I'm not going to do every block. I'm just going to do every 5 blocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that'll be 10,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that'll be 20,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that'll be 30,000. And you get the idea, 40,000. Cool. Now I've got to represent or draw these graphs down. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, when I look at this graph, my first table, when I looked at expenses, my expenses start at 12,000 and they end at 34,500. So starting at 12,000, let's just find this quickly. We seem to have lost it here. Okay, so 12,000, we're going to start, and that means I'm starting over here, and I'm going to 34,000, there's 30, 32, 34,000, that's 36, 35 is halfway, so 34 and a half is halfway of that. So roundabout over there. So when I draw a straight line of that graph, it's going to go from here all the way there, straight line. That wasn't quite a straight line. Okay, let's try and draw a straight line. Okay, because we wanted to try and be as accurate as possible. So I'm going to draw a straight line from 12 all the way down to 30, to 34 over there. Okay. Now, why is it a straight line? Folks, it's a straight line because the graph is going constantly at a constant price, going up. Okay, every one was 45 Rand. Then, the other graph I drew was when I start, don't sell any, I start at 0. When I sell 50, let's just get it here quickly. When I sell 50, I'm going to go all the way up there. All right, so my straight line. Where do they cross? They cross over here. And because they cross there, that is my break even point. Guys, you've got to know how to do this. You've got to know how to do an income and an expense graph on the same set of axes. Okay, practice, practice, practice. We'll see you after the break.